By 1850, industrialization had undermined aristocratic influence. How far do you agree? Industrialization certainly eroded several important aspects of aristocratic influence by 1850, particularly their monopoly over political power and their unchallenged position as the dominant economic elite. However, the decline should not be exaggerated. The landed aristocracy retained very substantial political, social, and cultural influence in mid-Victorian Britain, and in some respects, actually adapted successfully to the new industrial order. Overall, industrialization significantly weakened aristocratic dominance, but did not destroy it. The most obvious way industrialization undermined aristocratic influence was through the shift in economic power towards the new industrial and commercial middle classes. The rapid growth of factories, railways, coal, iron, and textiles created a new wealthy bourgeoisie whose fortunes were no longer tied to land. By 1850, industrialists such as the Strutts, the Peases, the Guest family, and the cotton lords of Lancashire possessed wealth that rivaled or exceeded many old landed families. The 1832 Reform Act, while limited, gave some of these men the vote and parliamentary seats, and the 1846 repeal of the Corn Laws, bitterly opposed by most of the landed interest, demonstrated that the interests of industrial and urban consumers could override traditional landed priorities. The rise of the Anti-Corn Law League, funded and led by manufacturers such as Cobden and Bright, symbolized the growing confidence and political weight of this new class. At the same time, industrialization changed the geography of power. The population shifted decisively towards the industrial North and Midlands. The 1851 census revealed that, for the first time, more people lived in urban than rural areas. This demographic shift reduced the relative importance of the southern agricultural counties that had long formed the heartland of aristocratic influence. Boroughs such as Manchester, Leeds, Sheffield, and Bradford grew rapidly and sent MPs to Westminster who were far more likely to sympathize with middle-class and nonconformist interests than with the traditional landed elite. Nevertheless, the aristocracy remained extremely powerful in 1850 and was far from being marginalized. They still dominated the House of Lords, where they could block or delay legislation, and they retained a very strong grip on the House of Commons. Even after 1832, around two-thirds of MPs were still drawn from landed families or were closely connected to the landed interest. The Conservative Party, the natural home of the landed classes, won the 1841 election and remained a major force. The repeal of the Corn Laws in 1846 split the Conservatives, but it did not destroy aristocratic influence. Many of the protectionists were themselves substantial landowners, and they continued to wield power in the counties and in the lords. Moreover, the aristocracy successfully adapted to industrialization rather than being swept aside by it. Many great landowners invested heavily in railways, mines, docks, and urban property. The Duke of Devonshire, the Marquess of Londonderry, and the Earl of Dudley all profited enormously from coal and iron on their estates. Aristocratic families also retained control over local government through the magistracy, the lord lieutenancies, and the new county councils. Socially, the landed elite continued to set the tone of society. The London season, country house parties, and the marriage market remained overwhelmingly aristocratic. Even the rising industrial rich frequently sought to buy land, marry into the aristocracy, or send their sons to public schools and Oxford, Cambridge, thereby confirming rather than overturning the prestige of the landed order. Finally, the pace and nature of industrialization in Britain was relatively gradual and controlled compared with later industrial revolutions elsewhere. There was no sudden overthrow of the old elite, as occurred in France in 1789, or in some parts of Germany after 1848. The landed aristocracy retained the monarchy's favor, dominated the officer class of the army and navy, and exercised enormous influence over the Church of England. These institutions remained powerful counterweights to purely industrial power. In conclusion, industrialization undoubtedly undermined aristocratic influence by creating a rival economic and political elite, shifting population and wealth northwards, and forcing concessions such as the 1832 Reform Act and Corn Law repeal. However, the aristocracy retained decisive political power, adapted economically to the new order, and preserved their social prestige and cultural dominance. By 1850, their influence had been seriously challenged and reduced in relative terms, but it had not been decisively undermined. The statement is therefore only partially true. Industrialization weakened aristocratic dominance, but did not destroy it.